Do you value control and stability or speed and adaptability when it comes to your EPM system? And can end of life tools really keep up with real time forecasting and the pace of today's business? Today, we're breaking down end of life versus modern EPMs, what each does well, where they fall short, and how to decide what's right for your organization. If you're evaluating your current system or just feeling the strain of planning cycles, this episode will give you clarity. Welcome back to Not Your Grandpa's JD Edwards, where we help you rethink how your ERP ecosystem supports your business today. And today we're tackling a big one: end of life versus new age EPM. Not from a hype perspective, but from a decision making perspective. Joining me is Mike Pilato, Vice President of EPM and Analytics at ERP Suites. Mike, first off, welcome back. And for those out there that haven't seen you on the podcast before, can you give us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, no, thank you, Nate, first and foremost, for having me. Really excited to attend this podcast. So Mike Pilato, based out of New Jersey, been with ERP Suites for 3 months. I'm responsible for the EPM practice, where I support global sales through delivery of all managed services and professional services. I bring 20 plus years in consulting, held leadership roles at the big fours, Accenture, IBM, and Navisite, where I ran similar books of businesses focused in the EPM and analytics space. So again, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And you know what? Let's just get into it. Why are so many companies reevaluating their EPM systems right now?
Great question. Companies aren't changing EPM because their systems failed. They're changing because the business is outpacing those systems. What worked in a slower, more predictable world doesn't hold when decisions need to be in real time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everything is changing so quickly these days, and especially with all the new technologies, AI, everything that is out there. So why not look at every system that you have and maybe talk about it a little bit? But what's changed in the business environment that end of life systems really weren't built for?
Uh, I would say three big shifts: speed, visibility, and alignment. Decisions are happening faster. Leaders want real time decisions. And the biggest piece is really one single source of truth, trusting your data. So, with those three big shifts, legacies systems weren't meant to keep up with this kind of change.
Yeah. And do you have any like specifics there in terms of like that single source of truth? Is that just their data from like their ERP, or is that financial data? Like what specifically are we talking about here?
It's all. So you have your ERP and your sources. You can have multiple ERPs, but it's also the homegrown kind of systems, your Excel driven, where you're having different data models being representative as what the single source of truth to finance leader might look like. So having an EPM system now can take all those source systems and that data and roll it up to what level of detail that the CFO organizations are looking for.
Yeah. And would you say that those are the points that most of these finance teams are struggling with the most?
100%. And I'd say they're stuck in the mechanics. And what I mean by that, it's so much Excel, manual consolidations, manual planning cycles, more time spent on gathering the data versus analyzing it. So finance should be driving strategy rather than chasing numbers.
Okay. So would you say that this is more of a technology problem or is it more of a process problem?
It's both, and it's driven by evolution. The systems didn't break; it's the business changed, and now processes are strained by the lack of capabilities that these legacy systems offer.
Okay. So it sounds like the issue isn't that these end of life systems stopped working, it's the way that businesses operate and how they've changed throughout time. And even finance teams are being asked to move faster, close their life cycle or close their books at the end of the cycle even faster now. They need to be more proactive, spend less time pulling the data together. And that's where the friction is really showing up, right?
That is correct, and that's a perfect
Okay.
summarization of, those major drivers of why we're seeing the change of why people are evaluating new EPM systems.
Okay. So let's break this down a little bit further. When we talk about end of life versus modern EPM, what are we comparing day to day?
So we're comparing two operating models. It's not about the systems themselves. One is structured, periodic, and controlled versus the other dynamic, continuous, and adaptive. So it's, understanding where your business needs to be and then leveraging those pain points and new requirements to pick what systems are going to best, solve and help you elevate your reporting platforms.
Okay. So, how would you say a typical end of life EPM process actually works today?
It's batch driven, periodic, planning happens in cycles, data moves in stages, and Excel fills the gaps. Again, continue to talk about Excel. It's a great leverage of, again, just a gap filler, but it's not giving you what the real systems offer in the newer EPM solutions. Reporting often depends on fewer key admins that can eventually be bottlenecks to that process.
Okay. So, it's more Excel heavy, focused more on manual processing instead of like an automation type of thing, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay. So, how does this differ from the modern cloud based platforms that are out there?
So great question. It's continuous in real time. And
Mhm.
you're going to continue to hear those terminologies. It's data is always current. Workflows are built into these systems. The business can self-serve insights and take the heavy reliability off of IT and the admins.
Okay. So yeah, so it's less manual processing. It's more of a platform that can do it for you instead of doing it yourself. Or is there still a lot of manual oversight that you see in even a modern platform?
Great question. Again, it goes back to standardizing your business processing. You could have the best system, but if you're not standardizing the business processing, you're still going to have those manual interventions.
Mhm. Okay. So like, what's the real trade off between the two? I mean, we talk about end of life or legacy systems out there that maybe a lot of people are saying it's not broken. Why would we change it? And then the new age stuff that maybe they haven't really looked into much because of that same idea.
No, that's good. It's again about where your business is and where your business has to go. It's control versus adaptability. Legacy system gives you tight control with limited flexibility. Modern platforms give you speed and agility, but require a mind shift of constant change and standardization.
Yeah. So it's that continuous, there's also that continuous evolution to gear you towards AI. And we had a podcast a few weeks ago that talked about specifically clean data. And that's kind of what you're getting at here of that single source of truth, right? So like if you have that single source of truth, you're using a modern system, it might be easier for you to gear yourself towards AI if that is in your goals as a company. Am I right on that?
That is correct, because again, it's a holistic overview of solving the bigger problems. And it starts with your ERP through your EPM platforms and then leveraging AI to, again, get better, quicker insights by eliminating manual intervention. But if you're not correcting from a source system itself into whatever reporting platform, bad data in, bad data out.
Mm. Do you maybe have like a use case that where a company underestimated what they're giving up, or maybe even gaining when they do switch?
Yeah, I see a lot of people underestimate all the time, and it goes on two sides of the equation. They underestimate the comfort they're leaving and the change required to leave that old way of thinking, way of working. And then the second is they also underestimate how much speed, flexibility, and scalability they will gain by going to a modernized EPM platform.
Right. So when they did make that switch, was there an issue there in terms of switching over the data? What did that kind of look like in terms of an actual integration?
So Great question. It all stems from being able to really plan out, understand your
Mhm.
requirements, change management across the top of it, and understanding the level of what your organization from a change perspective is. How are they, what's the readiness of, them to adapt to this new way of working, a new way of thought leadership in the sense of not worrying about chasing the numbers, but being strategic and providing those insights to make better strategic decisions.
Interesting. Yeah. So that really frames it well. It's not about one being right or one being wrong. It's about what your business needs more of. Is it control or is it adaptability? But when this gets real is when those differences start really impacting the business, right?
That is
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
So it's, again, it's the systems, the old outdated systems still can work. But again, it's how the market is shifting, how your business, how the growth of what your expectations are, a year, 5 years out. It just sets you up for success, leveraging the system and giving back quality time to the analyst to really study the data versus managing the data.
Yeah. So it frees up people to, instead of doing repeatable tasks that they would have to do every single day, it gives them the opportunity to grow the business in any other way, that instead of doing these repeatable tasks that you're looking at an Excel doc every single day and just making sure that the numbers line up, right? So it's funny to even think about because yes, there are many ways of even the legacy systems of the way around this, but you're saying that the legacy systems kind of play into more of the manual workload and the cloud base is more playing into the autonomous workload. Am I right?
That is 100% correct.
Okay, awesome. So let's talk about that. Where do companies start to feel the gap in their day-to-day operations?
I would say, again, it's let's not start with technology. It's the way you want to operate in the future. And again, it's understanding the growth, where your market is shifting towards where your competitors are going. It's then deciding on how you want to shift that operating model and then leverage the technology to, enhance that.
Mhm. So if we're talking about why someone should switch or the mindset that they're looking and why they would want to switch, how does someone decide that to actually be able to switch? Or maybe it's the right time, or maybe their business is growing to an exponential rate. What are the signals that some of our customers out there should be looking at?
So there are a couple of key questions I always look at. It's how much manual effort is involved today. Do you trust your data? How long is your close cycles? Uh, and how fast do you need to make decisions? Those are key triggers that should identify, okay, great. If you're answering those truthfully and transparently, you'll be able to understand what your next move in your EPM stages will be.
Mhm. And you talked about earlier in this episode about how long you have been throughout the Big Four and many of your other jobs that are out there. What was it like when they started utilizing EPM to this type of rate of like the newer systems in that, like the close cycles that they were doing and speeding that up? What was that experience like for you?
It was great. Working with like $18 billion companies and seeing again, everyone has the same challenges and struggles. But it's being willing to adapt and understand that there is products out there that can help you. With that being said, you also have to understand that you have to deep dive into your business processing. And that goes from your ERP into your EPM. But and I'll use an example, one of my clients, we took them from a 5 day close to a 1 day close. So, they're still looking to get real time data on a, hourly basis, but they took that from a 5 day to a 1 day. That gave back a lot of people's time that was manually putting that effort in because even though it was 5 days, there were like 10 plus people on a 24-hour shift for those 5 days trying to process data. So seeing them get that back, if it's on a personal matter or if it's really being able to now be strategic and helping the CFO organizations, and the board members and, really drive what their next steps and phases will look like, from a year out, it was amazing to me.
Yeah, I'm sure that those people are still thankful for you today. Jeez, I can't imagine that difference. Because yeah, you say like 5 days to one day, and if you're a common person that haven't been through something like this, maybe it's like, oh, who cares? That's only 4 days. Like, what are we talking about here? But to say the 24-hour shift, that is so much time that is put into an end of cycle close that you're really giving back not only the lifestyle that a lot of these people would love to live instead of working a 24-hour shift, and instead of maybe doing five of them, maybe they're only doing one, but maybe they're doing a little bit less. Maybe it's only an 8-hour shift and they can breathe a little bit and their productivity and other things aren't as diminished. Am I right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. And it's most accurate. Again, people don't understand what's going behind the scenes. Even if it was a 5 day close, it's still a lot of effort that, a lot of manpower that is being, put forth in that now it can recycle itself again. It could be on a personal life aspect, or it also could be now really focusing on making strategic decisions.
So we talked about what's great about the new EPMs and the modern cycle. When does it make sense to maybe stay on that end of life EPM?
You know, this is a challenging question I always come across because,
Mhm.
again, you always want to be able to adapt to technology, especially on the pace that technology is changing. But with that being said, if the business is stable, change is minimal, and there's no urgency for faster insights, then it could be the right call to stay on what systems you are.
Yeah. So if it's a smaller business that it's easy for them to stay on top of their books, or if it's, I can't imagine that too large of a business that's doing a lot of sales throughout the year, that I feel like that would still be a headache. So maybe it's not for them. But when you say stable business, what does that truly mean?
So to your point, if it's a smaller business, you're not looking to acquire companies, you're
Mhm.
staying in the same market share of where you've been in the last 5 years. You're not doing multiple currencies. You're not dealing with, like you said, growth that you're expecting to triple. Then maybe it makes sense to continue to, leverage the tools that you have. But with that being said, there's always room to improve.
Yeah.
And I want people to understand, just because it might feel you guys are stable, you don't know what you don't know. And that's what these other systems are able to provide, where you're not looking at it through those lens. But if you do take a step back and say, hey, let me just evaluate it, you might be amazed that what you thought was stable really isn't stable.
Yeah. So I kind of like your point right there. And you're getting at something that I know we've talked about a lot. When someone's going through a merger or an acquisition, what does that look like on legacy or end of life EPM versus the modernized version?
No, great question. And again, I'll use an analogy of a car. You could have a car that, was working well for the last 5 years, but with how technology and now is adapting to it, you're going to get maybe better gas miles because of the new technology. It's a similar thing in M&A. It's high pace. They're expecting a rinse and repeat kind of solution, turnkey solutions. So the newer EPM systems give you that opportunity to scale as you're growing and doing these acquisitions and minimizing TSAs. And what I mean by that, so as that deal closes, you already could have an integration from that company you acquired within day one to day 20, and reporting now as a company that is 100% whole, from the acquiring company to the acquisition that you just did.
Okay. So it saves headaches, it saves time. And again, it gives you that single point of truth, even in these crazy things like acquisitions and mergers, where there are so many other fires that you should be putting out other than your data. And I mean, that right there, that might be the best selling point that I've ever heard.
You're absolutely right.
Oh,
And the last word of that is trust, because we all
mhm.
know, right? At the end of the day, they're going to want to make sure everything in that acquisition that they went through in their diligence process, that it now all makes sense. And the quicker you can realize and recognize the data, the faster you'll get to that point.
Yeah. So, what are maybe the red flags that show up when it says it's time to modernize? It's time to make that shift, please.
Oh, that's great. Heavy Excel reliance, long plan cycles, limited agility, and the lack of trust in data. I will keep on highlighting that. It might have been the last. It should probably be the first. It's the lack of trust in the data. And in finance, if you're reactive instead of proactive, that's a big signal.
Yeah. And I know that there are so many people out there that absolutely love Excel, and you might be hurting their feelings here. I and again, we can joke about it all day, but it's just you have so many other tasks that are in your business today that could be just simple productivity things where you're not sitting there and looking at an Excel every single day, day in, day out, and making sure that every little box is checked at every single moment. And this modernized EPM seems like it kind of takes it out of your hands, where yes, there might still be time for a little bit of a manual oversight, but it also more like highlights the places where it needs manual oversight. Is that right? Or is it just completely eliminated in terms of manual oversight?
No, you're absolutely right. There's always going to be manual, and you always still want to have people looking over those numbers. But to the people that do love Excel, I do as well. So don't worry, there's still Excel involved. The difference is from Excel of the manual effort of pushing data in versus having the system do it. Now you use Excel because all these EPM platforms run off Excel driven reporting. Now you're using it again to be strategic and analyze the data versus pushing the data in, leveraging Excel. So Excel still is in there. And again, you still need oversight from a manual perspective, because again, you want to make sure the numbers are correct. And now making strategic decisions off those numbers and providing insights to your executive teams.
Yeah. So, if we're looking directly at this decision to modernize, what mistakes would you say companies should be on the lookout for when they're making this decision?
The biggest is chasing trends without defining the problem. You have to understand what the problem is before you go and solve it. And I will use AI, and we heard it, this past year, and everyone's saying it. Everyone was on the AI path, and 95% of the companies have not recognized an ROI on that in 2025 due to the data being wrong. So it's the same concept. You want to understand where you are in the journey, understand what your pain points are to solve, and then leverage the solution of whatever software package you're going to do to then drive those enhancements.
Yeah. Well, it's 2026 now, so they're still not recognizing it too, and that's a red flag in itself. But yeah, you're right. They're not defining the problem. They're just kind of going into it with the idea of, all right, we want AI. Let's just skip ahead and go straight into it. And something we've seen through our AI assessments is the data, if it's not clean, AI is just going to break your system. It's going to overcomplicate things. And it seems like EPM is one of those tools and one of those platforms that can really help you clean your data. Am I right in that? Or is there a little bit more manual oversight or specific like manual cleaning that you have to do? Or does EPM kind of streamline?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And again, I've, in my past experience with some of the bigger companies, EPM was a driver as they were consolidating on their ERP journey. So there was companies that had like 20 plus ERPs, and they knew it was going to be a 5-year stretch. They leveraged putting a data lake in between to be the single source as they're consolidating those 20 ERPs. But that single source of truth was feeding into the EPM. So as you consolidated the ERPs, it would still feed into the data lake, and then the data lake into the EPM. And what the EPM exposed and helped drive during the ERP roadmap and the strategy was that it corrected and helped standardize business processing, because there was 8 different business units that were doing 8 different business processing that in the end impacted the data and the trust of the data in the data lake as well as the EPM product.
Yeah. So it's not about evaluating the true platforms. It's about evaluating your bottlenecks because that's where it's really coming up. And yes, you can stay on your legacy or end of life EPM if that works for your business. But if you are having a lot of these problems that you have plainly put out there for us, then it's time to evaluate and maybe it's even time to modernize. But I think the biggest takeaway that about this isn't that it's about chasing new technology. It's about understanding where your problems are and choosing the right way to solve them. And if you're in that situation right now, if you're working through this decision, ERP Suite is here to help JD Edwards customers, but also other customers that are out there to evaluate exactly where they are and what makes sense for them next. Whether it's optimizing your current system or exploring modernization, the goal is the same, making sure your technology supports your business. You can learn more at erpsuites.com/EPM-services. Right now, you can get in touch with Mike Pilato and his team to learn even more about what EPM can do for your business and about trying to close your cycles even faster. But that's a wrap on today's episode of Not Your Grandpa's JD Edwards. If this helped you think through your EPM strategy, share it with your team, like, subscribe. These are the conversations that lead to better decisions. And remember, it's not about chasing new technology, it's about solving the right problems. We'll catch you next time.